Diddly do 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 do. Hello, this is Benjamin Boyce. I am live streaming to your heart's content, or maybe to mine. We'll see whose heart is racing the more by the time we're done with this. I was scheduled to have a live stream with a friend of mine, but they have not responded to me. And so I'm waiting for them to show up. Maybe they won't show up. And if they don't show up, then I guess we'll just kind of wrap it up. But I did have one story to share. With illustrations. I actually did a little bit of work on this particular live stream because I was stood up and I was waiting for them to dial in. It's been like a half an hour or something like that. And they still haven't showed, but I wanted to hang out with you guys and see how you're doing. If you want to ask me any questions, I can talk to you about some things. It wasn't a cancellation. It was more of a stood up. Wait, a ghosting? No, it wasn't a ghosting because he's too cool of a person to ghost me. But actually, hold on. This is an idea. Let's do one RD, hit me up on Skype. Maybe we'll have a, is there like an official position if you ask somebody out to a dance and then they don't show up, so you have like a second position? Is there such a thing as like a second or a pitch hitter? Is that what a pitch hitter is? Pinch hitter? Maybe this other person will join me now that they seem to be bored, and maybe they're lacquered enough to want to join me. I'm gonna tell a story, and Grace is gonna know what I'm talking about. I just thought this was a fabulous story. I mean, it's just, I never really got into, okay. I'll tell a preview story. I probably shouldn't tell this story, but when I was 20, I somehow got a whole bunch of this illegal substance that's grown in Mexico. And when it arrives in Chicago, it's probably like the worst version of this particular illegal substance. It's no longer mostly illegal most places, but it was very illegal for a long time. And then it's slowly become more and more legal here and there and everywhere. I don't know what state it is in Chicago, the legality of this substance, but somehow I got like a lot. And I fancy myself a dealer. I'm like, oh, I'm going to try to deal. Right? I don't know why I thought this, because I was cool. I was rad. I was going to turn 21. I'm like, I'm going to be a badass. I'm going to sell this stuff. So I'm just like hanging around. I have all this stuff on me, like an ounce of this material. It's plant-based matter with a whole bunch of seeds in it because it's just the absolute Mexican dirt version of this particular substance. And and I'm driving around with a really good friend of mine, Angela and Chris Carini. And oh man, Angela was actually, this is really sad. I shouldn't say this, but I want to honor her memory. We were really good friends back in the mid to late 90s. We really had a really intense connection, a really deep connection. And it just so happened that somebody broke into her house a few years ago, probably, I think about 7 years ago, and killed her and her cat and lit her apartment on fire. It was just like totally random, like heartbreaking. This is the only person I know, like of my generation, that I know that has died so far. There's probably been a couple other people. Well, there's been a couple other people, but Angela was the first person that, I was really close to. She was a dancer. We'd end up dancing and just dancing and dancing and doing all this dance. And we had a really physical relationship, but it wasn't sexual, but it was very, very intimate and intense. But it stops shy somehow of that. And she actually helped me out. I bottomed out at the end of during the winter of my 21st year. So I fashioned myself a dealer of this substance. And then by the end of that year, I had gotten mixed up in some really dark, heavy material. And at the very bottom, she kind of rescued me, and she brought me to Northwestern, her college. And we danced, and she reminded me of my body and warmth and the human pace, because I was trying to escape being human. But anyways, back that summer, we were driving around. We just like drive around at night, hot Chicago summer, and we went to this park. And we get out of this, when we start walking through this park, and we're hanging out with all these people. And this one guy was like, there's this group of men, and the race doesn't really matter, but it kind of matters, but it doesn't matter because I'm just like this white boy from suburbia, and like, this is Chicago. It's like it's a different place, different time. And this guy's like, hey man, do you have any, of this substance? I'm like, yeah, you want to buy some? He's like, yeah, sure. You got some? I'm like, come back to the car. And Chris, so there's Angela and Chris, her younger brother. And Chris was really, really street smart. He actually is an artist. Chris Carini, I'm sure you could find him. Really like bombastic art. But he was like a gangsta guy. And he would tell me stories about like the crap they would get into. And just like, he was really street smart. And he's like, Ben, don't do this. This is back when I was Ben. Don't do this. What are you doing? I'm like, no, this is cool. This is cool. So I bring these guys, this group of men, back to the car. And we all get in the car, me, Angela, and Chris. And then I try to, do this deal with this guy. And I hand him over, and he opens it and he smells it. He's like, okay, thank you. And he puts it away, and he stands up. I'm like, are you okay? He's like, no, we're good now. And like, it was so scary because they were totally able to completely overwhelm all of us. And the whole time Chris is like, let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. I was just so naive. And that happened several times. Like after that, I'm like, okay, I'm not a dealer, but I would keep on trying to like purchase different substances, and I would always get ripped off. I would always get ripped off over and over and over again. Like I was just so naive. So that's a setup, right? So I'm like, I do this podcast thing, and I'm like, I need to really get a good like icon for the podcast, right? I need to pay some money and get a really good icon for the podcast, get to the next level. There's this guy, Mike Nina, and he told me, Ben, you're doing really good work, but you need to up your production values. I'm like, well, I kind of don't want to, because I really like being like kind of grubby. And it kind of protects me from too much attention because people don't take me seriously. So only people who find the content valuable will take me seriously. But if I start polishing things up, then I become a threat. I have all these excuses, but eventually I'm like, okay, I'm going to get some good art for the channel, right? So I put it out on Twitter, and like I'm looking for some art. I want to pay for some art for my channel. I have this concept. Gracie, you come into this story. So here we go. So I put out on Twitter that I want this thing, and this person contacts me on Twitter, and they're like, hi, I do this work here. Wait, okay, there we go. They're hi. I'm an artist. I want to help you out here. And here, you can see this on the screen. Here is some of my reference work. What kind of work are you looking for? Right. Probably. Oh yeah. Ooh. Okay. Hold on just a second. Let me finish this story. Wait, hold on a sec. Do you want to join? So hopefully you're listening, so I don't have to type the whole time. So anyway, like, here's some of my reference work. What kind of work are you looking for? So hold on just a second, Morty, and I hope your screen name doesn't show. So if you want to change your screen name in Skype, or contact me through another Skype account. So if you want to keep your name secret, you can keep it secret. Sorry. This person says, here's some of my reference work. What kind of work are you looking for? I'll show you the 3 pictures they sent me. Sent me that one, and then they sent me this one. See this? And they sent me this one. And this was like, oh, that's good. This is good. This is kind of what I want. Like, this is great. Cool. So they're like, well, what's your concept? And okay, Marty, I'll get to you after this story. Sorry, Marty's going to join us in just a bit. So I send them Gracie Zeman. She's in chat somewhere. Maybe she jumped off. I was talking to her about this concept, and she spent an hour drawing this picture, right? It's just basically a picture. I know it kind of doesn't make sense, but I've just had this in my head for a while of this boy and this girl kind of being together alone. and being meditative and reading books and being together, but together alone, with their backs to each other, and they're reading books. And it doesn't really make sense because why would they be listening to the same podcast, but reading different books, whatever. There's probably you could probably like play with it, but that was just my concept. Gracie was kind enough to kind of sketch that out for me. She got some models and she just did this sketch. And I'm like, okay, to this artist, supposedly this artist, I'm like, okay, this is what I want. And I want it done in the style of a silhouette, like something from like Victorian England, just like with really nice lines, 2 colors, and just really fine lines, really smooth lines like that. Do you guys see that? So I wanted this picture done in this style. They're like, oh, no problem, hun. Here's my PayPal. And then we negotiate a price and I pay half up front, which wasn't a lot of money, but it was a decent sum. I paid them a decent sum because I was expecting decent work, right? Okay. So this is why I suck at business. Instead of reverse image searching their images, and instead of like digging into who this person was, I took them at their freaking word and I sent them money. Time goes by. A week goes by, a couple weeks go by, 3 weeks go by. I'm like, no rush, but I just want to remind you, about this thing. They're like, oh, no worry, hun. They keep on calling me hun and babe and hun and love and stuff like that. Okay, this is the thing. So then they send me this initial sketch. This is what they send me. Right? They're like, okay, here's the draft. Tell me what you think and what you want. And I look at this and I'm like seriously? I see this thing. I'm like, they're like, do you have any input? I'm like, do I have any input? Like, I don't even know how to begin. I don't even know how to begin. And this is what totally gets me. Look at these freaking hands. Like, look at those hands. Like, who draws hands like that for hundreds of dollars? Like, how does that even work? I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I don't want to be rude to this person, right? I don't want to be rude to them. I'm like, how do I do this? Hold on a second, Marty. You keep on. Okay. Yeah. All right. Marty keeps on. Hold on, Marty. Okay. So I'm like, okay, this is what I do. I'm like, I try to do constructive criticism. I'm like, I don't know how to begin, but every single line of what you do is wrong. Everything's wrong. I actually, I forgot to queue up one video. I'll have to queue up a video in just a second, but I send this to Gracie, and Gracie's like, it looks like what they did was just take my picture and trace it. I'm like, oh, it kind of does. And so I loaded it in my image program, and that's what they did. They loaded the picture into their drawing tablet and they just traced it. Like, what? I'm like, okay, listen, I want something artistic. And I showed them my first evergreen project. Hopefully I'm not blowing out. I showed them my first evergreen project, which was these 2 intaglio prints, which is you get these little pieces of copper and you engrave them. And the amount of attention to detail in this intaglio printing is insane because every single tiny marking is going to show up on the final project. You really, really have to slow down. And this print is, I think it's a 6x9 or a 5x4. I think this is a 5x4 copper plate. And you can see in the details, this is what I try to explain to the person. I just want fine lines. I'm a stickler for lines. That disappeared. So I'll show you the other one. I'm a stickler for fine lines, right? This is the stuff I did as a freshman in college, albeit I was a 36-year-old freshman in college, but I'm not an artist by any means. I'm not an artist. I just doodle, right? I'm like, this is what I want. And then I figure out that, oh wait, I think I've been had. I think I've been had. So I go back to them. I'm like, did you actually draw this picture? I send them this picture on the screen. I'm like, did you actually draw that? And they're like, no. That's just reference work. I'm like, no. You said it was your reference work. Can I find that? They said, here is some of my reference work. Like, okay, like you totally scammed me. So I was really generous. I'm like, you have till sunset today to send me all my money back except $40. You can keep $40. You can keep $40, but if you don't give me my money back, I'm going to go through and like this whole thing because you basically defrauded me, right? So I'm just a horrible businessman, and I don't know how to talk to an artist. I'm not an artist myself. I know what I like, and I know what's crappy, you know, which would be what? Which would be something like this, right? Oh, I can't even show it anymore. Yeah, like that is not what I want. But how do you find somebody who doesn't do that? Anyway, so I have to figure out how to find another artist, or I should just basically do it myself. But anyways, I'm a bad businessman. I'm really bad at like checking my sources and like not getting into bad deals here. Let's get this brother on. Let's see if it works. Here's Artie Morty. As soon as he answers, we'll show up. Thanks for joining. This is just a 3 sheets and the wind.
How to find another artist, or I should just basically do it myself.
Could you mute your
bad at, like checking my sources,
computer?
Not getting into bad deals here.
Okay, Marty's here, and so am I. Can you say hi?
Hello.
Hey. Yeah. We're vertical videoing with Artie Morty.
I'm on my phone, so
Oh, that's fine. You can go vertical. It'll automatically crop it. But if you want to like put it down so you can like relax for half an hour and drink with the other hand and not give the pukies to the audience.
Well, I'm gonna see if I can fix this. How's that? Is that like almost normal? Very spontaneous.
This is great. Artie Morty, how do we introduce you? Are you co-host with Graham Linehan?
Linehan. Oh, I can see myself on the screen. Oh my God.
There you are.
Scary. Yeah, I don't know how I describe myself.
So, well, what do you guys do?
It's Graham, and what's that?
Do you have headphones?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. This is totally off the cuff.
I know. It's like I'm drinking a little wine too. It's very spontaneous.
It's totally spontaneous. I can regulate my behavior to get the best audio, but the Skype, I don't trust Skype to select the right voice. This is Artie Morty. He runs a show with Graham Linehan, who's a Irish TV writer and gender justice warrior, or sex justice warrior. He's a warrior for justice, for women specifically. And Artie and him run a... it's been about a year you guys have been running this thing.
That's right. Yeah, it has been. Yeah.
And you guys do a lot of interviews. You guys break down the news.
We do. Yeah, I got headphones coming. It's going to be better soon.
Oh, it's all good. We're good.
Yeah, it's been great. You know, my first public YouTube appearance was on your channel. So, you know.
Wait, didn't you have... No, you were already running a show. I think I saw a video of you before I...
Not a show. What I did was I made a few YouTube videos, and they got very few views. And then I got a lot of attention very quickly. And yeah, you were one of the first people to sort of to give me some attention.
There
And
we go.
yeah,
I'm the giver of
we're
attention.
almost set up. How's that?
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. So how are you doing? It's been a year and change. My whole entire life has been devoted to, you know, talking about the gender identity ideology situation, which you've been very involved in as well, but you've got a lot of things going on. You're just a critic of and an analyst of and a discusser of culture at large. And there's a lot of problems with wokeness, but you're just much more of a sort of much more philosophical about the whole thing.
Well, I'm not a bartender, so I have to diversify my content. You know, because I don't
I'm no longer a bartender because I was a bartender at a gay bar, and it just got too hot with my, you know,
what do you mean
being
too
so
hot? Like
critical.
the chaps came off?
Well, you know, I have a public. My name is an Artie Morty in real life, but my face is very much on YouTube, and I'm very critical of gender identity ideology.
And you were getting pushback in the gay community.
starting to get a little bit, not
Okay.
intensely, but enough to make me very uncomfortable and enough to make me want to not be working in the middle of the gay community anymore. So yeah, I quit my job.
And devoted your attention to?
A number of things, but among them, the podcast and, trying to trying to educate the world about what's going on, the madness of gender identity ideology. Yeah.
What is it called? I didn't want to mispronounce it. It's the podcast that you run with Graham.
Oh, it's called The Mess We're In. The Mess We're In.
Yeah. Is that an acronym? Or could it be?
No, it's not. We were joking that we just said a sentence like, it's like this mess we're in, which is the name of a PJ Harvey song. And we kind of misquoted it and named the show The Mess We're In instead, which is a great way to avoid copyright too. So.
Yeah, totally. Those articles, if you switch up an article, you're totally safe.
Exactly. Yeah. So the name just kind of came up spontaneously in a conversation, and the show just kind of developed organically. It was just Graham and Benji and me just shooting the shit, chatting about things. We decided to do this, once a week and broadcast it live. And it just built and built and built, and then Benji's moved on and we're still friends, but she's doing her other things. And then Helen Staniland came in, and it's a really fun show because it's like a weekly digest of what's going on. The funny thing about gender identity ideology is that there's just so much news. The trans movement is so crazy that there's just so much news and there's so much to digest. And it's just such a big thing, right? So you almost need a show to just digest weekly what's going on in the news. So that's what we sort of become. And I hope it becomes a nice archive. If there are future historians who want to know what happened, in the craziness of gender identity, the gender identity ideology movement, which is hopefully going to be short-lived, it'll be a nice resource. So, we'll have a weekly. This is what happened every week in the movement. Yeah.
I don't mean this combative, but you said that it's crazy, so you obviously have a lens on it. What's the position that you guys are taking on this? Like overall, kind of gender critical?
Is very much that like it's pretty it's pretty pro rad femme, pretty sympathetic to radical feminists. But always the position is that, anybody who identifies whatever they identify as a human being deserving of respect. But material reality is a thing that exists, and we can't deny that. So it's about freedom of speech. It's about material reality being a real thing, but also about gays and lesbians and women's and girls' rights mattering. So we're very, we've had many trans people on the show. We've had people with all sorts of different viewpoints on the show. Like politically, so to speak. But our position is that there are problems with this movement because it's denies material reality. It's harmful to women and girls. It's harmful to gays and lesbians. But that's not to say that anybody who identifies as trans or who has had a sex change or who is transsexual is at all a villain. Yeah. You've had so many amazing trans people on your show too.
Yeah.
You're Jamie Shoup or Lisa Shoup, whatever, James Shoup, many, many names. Elisa Shoup. That's a really interesting person. That was a really extraordinary one, don't you think?
Yeah. That was very powerful. That was very raw, very raw.
Yeah, it was. And that's needed for people to really understand what's going on. I have a sort of, not a soft spot, but I feel like people who experience autogynephilia are really misunderstood. And there are a lot of problems with people who experience autogynephilia. Many of them behave very badly, but many of them don't as well. And we need to just learn, and we need to learn more about what's going on in the mind of people who experience autogynephilia. So things like, the Shoup interview and stuff really just help people to just understand what's going on. It's such a complex, deep, and very polarizing, very emotional topic,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, since we're talking about sexuality, the forestalling a snapback to very straight trad lines of behavior, and straight people will not be saved if the pendulum swings all the way back. Because if a true pendulum swings against gender ideology and it goes in full force, it won't just disrupt trans rights, gay rights, It will also start to expect men to give up pornography and women to stop having abortions. Like there's a, by which I mean that once we deviate from like the very straightest of straightness, it's not necessarily a slippery slope. And I think that it's really difficult for people to start to, well, I think that it's really interesting or nuanced to try to suss out when you say that it's some people with autogynephilia have bad behavior, you're not necessarily shaming their sexuality because that is a sexuality. The sexuality, as the researchers put it, is that there's an erotic target identity disorder where instead of being attracted to a man or a woman outside of you, you're attracted to yourself as a woman. Like there's this...
Yeah, it's this introverted heterosexuality. Like the vast majority of men, they're sexually attracted to the females, you know, and this is an instinctual thing. The sex signaling that comes from the female form, the female of the species, long hair, things that, you know, maybe change from century to century, but we all figure out in our youth what counts as a female sex signal and what counts as a male sex signal. And we start to become attracted to the female sex signals if we're straight men. Not that I'm one, but I'm the polar opposite of that. But, you know, if you're straight, but your sexual attraction is starting to like boomerang onto your own body, if your erotic targeting is encompassing your own body, you're going to want a sex signal to yourself, and you're going to want to express these sort of feminine sex signals in your own body, you know?
Yeah.
It's just, I see it as just introverted heterosexuality, and in and of itself can be seen as a neutral thing that doesn't have a moral element whatsoever to it.
Yeah.
But it's so easy, and I've gotten in a lot of people get very heated about, because a lot of people who experience this, the ones who get all the attention, the word autogynephilia doesn't represent the some 5% of males who experience some degree of, you know, self-directed heterosexuality. To many people, that word represents the small minority of ones who are expressing it publicly and who are doing it abusively towards women. You know?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to get in some trouble.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Wait, isn't that what your show is all about? The mess you're in is the mess you're getting in?
Yeah. But no, I think autogynephilia is something that's really interesting, and there are a lot of problems with some of the people within it, but there are a lot of people who experience it who, you know, fine. Yeah.
Okay. Since we're just going to get in trouble, this is what you made me think of. You said earlier on in life, we begin to suss out what's a female signal and what's a male signal and what we're attracted to. What about gender non-conforming people? Butch lesbians, effeminate gay man. If you're effeminate and a gay man, you're still attracted to the male, but maybe the male effemination. If the effeminate male might be more attracted in the gay community, right?
Yeah. So that's the difference between what you are and what you're attracted to.
Oh, okay.
So if you're an effeminate male, that doesn't affect the fact that you're probably attracted to masculine males. In fact, this was my problem. When I was a kid, I was a very feminine male and a very effeminate male. So I thought that all kinds of effeminacy in males were my people, like very feminine, like David Bowie, just these very feminine glam rock kind of pop stars were the kinds of people I associated with and I liked. But the problem was I wasn't actually attracted to them. I don't find David Bowie attractive at all. I find him the greatest rock star of all time, but I'm sexually attracted to like lumberjacks, you know? So there's a difference between associating with feminine males and feeling an identity with feminine males. But that's not what I'm sexually attracted to. I'm sexually attracted to masculine males. And that confused me for the longest time because I was like, okay, my people are like these really feminine guys who wear mascara and dress up very feminine, but I'm not attracted to any of them. What I'm actually attracted to are these like, you know, when I was young, it was like the skater boys. And as I got older, it was like, you know, you know, like beefier masculine men. So there's a difference between how you want to express yourself and what you're attracted to. That sort of partially addresses your question, I think, maybe. But
that I'm wary of. I mean, it's kind of a trope right now, so I don't know to what degree it's true, but there is kind of a trope, and there might be some truth in it. There's probably more than a little truth in it, of the bully of gay men, or the bully in high school who beats up the effeminate male, the male who beats up the effeminate male, the hyper masculine male that beats up the effeminate male is beating up the effeminate male because he's actually attracted to the effeminate male, which is another realm of confusion. for somebody in that position, to be a masculine man who's attracted not to women, but to effeminate males.
And he's threatened by that, so he wants to beat them up.
Well,
There used to be a trend that said that all homophobes were like that. They used to say, if you hate gays, it's because you want to fuck gays. And that always annoyed me because I was like, yeah, I'm not seeing it that way, I've had a lot of furtive encounters with straight guys, and they weren't those kinds of guys, A lot of guys, the kinds of guys who beat me up, didn't have a drop of sexual attraction to me. I could quite tell, So there's some truth to what you're saying for sure, but that's not the whole story. The idea that everybody who hates gays, it's because they're having like a paranoia and an anxiety about their own.
Yeah, like the American Beauty kind of
yes, exactly. No, I think there's some truth to that for sure, but that's just part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just a genuine. There's two kinds of there's sexual attraction, and then there's sexual. I mean, the word that is the opposite of attraction is revulsion, but that's too ugly a word, so we call it aversion instead. Mm-hmm. So you can be sexually attracted to males, or you could be completely not sexually attracted to males. So if you're on a scale of 0 to 10. If your sexual attraction to males is 0, then you're completely heterosexual, right? And if your sexual attraction to males is 10 and total, then you're completely homosexual, right? Mm-hmm. But it doesn't stop at 0. It goes into the negatives. There's aversion. You could have a sexual attraction to males that's a negative 10. Now, this is important because I've had sex with men who, I swear to God, they will have sex with men, but they are not homosexual. They're not gay. Because if you're whether or not you're gay is whether or not you are sexually aroused by males. But that's not the same as whether or not you're willing to have sex with a male. If your sexual attraction to a male is a 0, okay, that means you're not attracted to males at all. But it's not a negative 10. That means you're not repulsed by males at all. You're kind of neutral on the subject, Oh,
okay. Yeah.
It means if you were to choose to open up a browser and watch some porn, 100% of the time it would be heterosexual porn because your sexual attraction to males is 0. But if a gay guy was sitting next to you and said, you want a blowjob? He'd be like, yeah. All right. He'd be willing. Does that make any sense? Whereas a guy whose aversion is a negative 10, the idea of receiving a blowjob from a man would be literally like, no way. It would trigger like a like a panic response.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So a lot of men, they're not sexually attracted to other men at all. They're just not all that repulsed by them enough that their level of horniness can sort of override their degree of repulsion. If their degree of repulsion is not that high.
Interesting. Because that is an interesting concept because the male sex drive or the testosterone fueled drive or libido it will like smash through certain forms of revulsion or certain things because there's a certain desire that kind of can overrule a lot of different.
And we see that whenever men are in prisons, men are sleeping with each other. Teenage men, when their testosterone levels are so high, they're all experimenting with each other, so if there's not a lot of women around or if you're just super, super horny, guys are going to start fooling around with each other. That's just the way it works, right? Yeah. In male sexuality anyways. I'm sure there's more or less the same with female sexuality, but that's one of those things where it's not parallel. Sexuality is one of the things where men and women are just completely different,
They're really different. Even on the level of the blood flow, if you go into the hard science, the way that like a
fallometry, the kinds of things that arouse blood flow in your genitals in males have to do with a specific target of thing that you're attracted to. And the kinds of things that arouse blood flow in females have to do with just being exposed to an erotic environment, Does that make sense?
Yeah. The level of confusion that it might be the case that a certain level of gender ideology has been able to advance so far because of the amount of moral importance that we put on sex and the amount of confusion that's inherent in sexual development, and then also to the degree that it informs your identity, is really powerful. And I'm not someone who ascribes to identity in the cultic way that it is put now, but I do have an identity. I do have this relationship to myself. I have this image of myself that's that I build up and that I base my other relationships on, to a lesser degree now that I'm halfway away from 20 as I was when I was born, or whatever the math is like that. Now that I'm getting older, the identity doesn't matter so much, but it was really important for me, especially in my teenage years, to have an identity. And then I was having all these really, really strong feelings that would completely override me. And it wasn't just, for me, my sexuality was never just this isolated thing. It was really tied up in this romantic, poetic kind of experience of creativity, like this verbal creativity and this expression creativity, and the feelings and the sexuality was all really tightly bound and very strong for me. So forging that identity. And then, so the conversations around gender and the way that autogynephilia is suppressed within the gender ideology community, because it is, oddly enough, it's stigmatized, or they don't want to talk about it, or a lot of autogynephiles, we can suppose, would like that to not be something that's ever spoken about, because it would maybe get in the way of people accepting them as them, because our society at large looks down on sexuality, or we have a hard time grokking divergent forms of sexual behavior.
Yeah, isn't it ironic and tragic that these are people who who really are traditionally associated with the lesbian and gay community, because these are by and large heterosexual males, but they actually do have an affiliation with the lesbian and gay community in that they have an atypical sexual orientation. But what they're trying to do, instead of saying, yes, I have a sexual orientation that's atypical just like you do, what they're doing, instead of saying you have an identity that's different just like we do, they're trying to reframe everything as an identity, And I find that really frustrating, because being gay isn't an identity. It's not a label that you slap on yourself.
Wait, hold on. You worked in a gay bar. Isn't that an identity? I mean, there's still a marketing term. Like, there's a marketing level. Oh, yeah. So there is,
well, sure. But on a fundamental level, being a homosexual means you take dicks in your butt if you're a man, or you put your dick in other people's butts. I hate to be blunt, but that's what this is about. This is about the act of sex.
Okay.
Yeah. And and this is what forms your homosexual identity. This is the basis of homophobia and stuff. It's not about labels. It's about the when you realize that you're sexually attracted to homosexual sex acts, it's very frightening, and it's it fills you with guilt and shame. And when other people realize you're sexually attracted to homosexual sex acts, that's where gay bashing comes from, and that's where violence against homosexuals comes from. So it's really not about a label. It's not about labels and slapping a label on yourself. It's about the we're all apes. We're Homo sapiens. And we're male Homo sapiens or female Homo sapiens who are same-sex attracted. This is a very fundamental part of, this is just biological reality. And we're trying to interpret it in this weird abstract way through our cultural forms and our cultural ideas. A lot of them are just kind of folkloric and silly and not very scientific. But we really have to fixate on the material reality of homosexuality, because we're in a really hard time right now, especially because of the internet and social media, where everybody is just kind of abstracting their lives and their bodies and their identity into these things that have no connection to material reality anymore. I think it's really, really a problem. Oh my God, I just threw like a million ideas all together there.
Well, no, I mean, the Katie Herzog speaks about this, the erasure, like the literal erasure of lesbians, because so many of them are now transitioning. And it's an open question whether, if that technology always existed, that would always be happening, and there would be no such thing as lesbians.
Well, why are we not questioning at all why this is happening? It's not the part of gender identity ideology is, if somebody says they have an alternative gender identity, you don't question the why. And the why is the most interesting, fascinating, and important question. Never in history have people questioned their biological sex and decided they can change it, because you can't change it. It's one of these things that is a given in your life, like your height or your age. or your birthday. They're not things you can choose to change, literally. If you decide to announce that you're younger than you were, we could say it's probably because you're paranoid about your age. You're afraid of growing up or whatever. Or the opposite, you want to say you're older than you are. We can see the psychological reasons why you would lie about your age. But why would you lie about your sex? We're not allowed to ask these questions, And these questions are the most important questions, especially when it's a crisis around, minority disadvantaged people. Lesbians face so much discrimination in society. It's not a coincidence that lesbians are almost overwhelmingly the ones who are saying that they're non-binary or transgender, or trying to opt out of these labels.
Mm-hmm. So within the male gays community,
male gays,
how is the gender ideology working itself out there? Is it one of kind of within your sphere, the social sphere, and why you decided to opt out of being working in public in that community? Was it because of some version of wokeness of like a party line? And why? And have gay men that you've seen that have reacted to the gender critical view, are they thinking through this? Are there anybody? Is there anybody that has thought? No, so they're not. They're just
some people are. There's a strange thing with gay men because they're kind of at a distance. It's really impacting so far. It has been impacting lesbians much more than gay men. And I pay attention to what's going on with lesbians because I feel tremendous solidarity with lesbians. But I think a lot of gay men just don't. They're just caught up in their own cultures and identities. And to be honest, the honest truth is lesbian culture and gay culture are quite distant from each other in the real world. If you're not sort of thinking about this academically and going online and looking at this stuff, lesbian culture is very far removed from gay culture. There isn't a lesbian and gay community at all. But I pay attention to what's going on with lesbians. I care about lesbians. So I'm very concerned about the well-being of lesbians because I have solidarity with them. But most gays, it's not impacting gay men yet directly. They're seeing it in the media where there's shared space with gays and lesbians, articles about lesbians. They're sharing pages with articles about gay men. And there's just this sort of knee-jerk we're being told that we're supposed to, all this gender identity ideology stuff is the new way to go. Some gay men just have the luxury of saying, fuck it, this is stupid, trans just doesn't make sense. It's not quite, and they can just casually dismiss it. But some gay men get this sense of like, I need to be on top of things. I need to be, I'm sure it's the same with straight progressives, there's just this sense of like, I need to be progressive. And it's more so with gay men. But it's not a very personal, direct thing, because for many gay men, it isn't a direct experience. I think they sense that there's a solidarity because the narrative that's being constructed around trans is that these are vulnerable people with, who have a similar narrative from gay men. And so there's a sort of a sense of protecting these people who are vulnerable and that kind of thing. But the honest truth is it's just a bit, I think when gay men just knee-jerk join in on the trans women or women bandwagon, it just feels a bit lip servicey and lazy. Because it's not really impacting gay men the way it is really, really severely on lesbians. Because lesbians are all being convinced to declare themselves either non-binary or trans men and to literally medically transition some of the time. And B, they're being convinced to completely let men into their spaces and to even have sex with them, So it's a much more intense experience for lesbians than it is for gay men. But it's still hard because even the small number of gay men who get gung-ho on this stuff, they're really gung-ho, they'll viciously attack you. So, they'll dox you, they'll organize campaigns to get you fired and that kind of thing. And it's really scary.
How do you rope those young whippersnappers in, Marty?
Rope them in or rope them out?
Well, I don't know. Well, I guess by rope them out, you mean like give them less power, or because they're just
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think slow and steady, LGBT Alliance, just trying to educate people and, just showing that we're intelligent, smart people who are not bigoted. Showing respect to people who have gender dysphoria is really important, trying to offer as much respect and trying to just show that we understand that there are some people who identify as transgender for reasons that are very compassionate and sympathetic. But this movement at large is it's a big ass mess, you know.
There was footage that surfaced, I think it was about a month ago, probably one of our mutuals, gay man in the UK. There was a Pride March, because I guess every month needs a Pride March now, but whatever. He was kicked out and vilified, and they yelled at him because he had a shirt on, either Adult Human Female or LGB Alliance or something like that. And
It was a hat.
What?
I think it was a hat and a shirt. Yeah.
It was a hat and a shirt, yeah. But the way that he was treated was just over the top. And the way that he was then, dogpiled on Twitter was over the top. It was just completely disrespectful. This is why I bring it up. It was completely disrespectful. And it just seems like a lot of the people who are marching in those marches and leading these online mobs don't care about individuals. They are operating on a sociological level, which is sociopathic, actually. They're not building connections.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's because the gay rights movement was so defensive for so long. We were the underdogs for so long, and we really suffered. There was the massive, the AIDS crisis. Many people died, many people suffered, many people struggled. It's just a really, really, the story, the narrative, the arc of the gay rights movement is profoundly moving, I find, and really an extraordinary story of activism at its finest in a lot of ways, but also with a lot of problems. God, someone should make like a 20-hour epic of the gay rights, struggle.
Don't tempt me.
You've got your evergreen pieces. What are you on, episode 29 by now?
No, I got to finish it up. I'm just working on episode 25, which is actually just episode 24 plus. So.
But anyways, I've lost my train of thought, but I was saying something about how so this epic, oh shit, too much drinking.
No, we're fine. We're just talking. You were about to broach this really great Uncle Marty story about the gay rights movement and why you think it is such a heroic tale. Where did it begin?
Well, it's always been a heroic tale. I was only bringing that up as a tangent to talk about something else, but this is a spontaneous chat.
No, we're drinking. Fun. Yeah, no, we're drinking. We're fun. We're interrupting each other, and people don't like it when I interrupt my guests, but fuck them.
I can't see the comments right now because I'm on my phone.
That's fine. They're just being nice and mean in equal measure. No more nice than mean.
It's always the way. Yeah, the gay rights movement is really glorious and legendary. And this is the tangent, but it's kind of sad that we're losing a little bit of that glorious legacy because it's calcified into this horrible thing, Oh yeah, I guess that goes back to what I was saying, is that there was so much righteousness in the gay rights movement for so long that now people just rest on that. Now people just think anybody who has any opposition to anything that has weaseled its way into LGBT obviously must be evil. But they didn't realize how easy it is to tack your own issues onto LGBT. First it was the banks taking over the gay pride parades. Then it was the politicians, all vying to be at the front of those parades because it would give them, an electoral advantage. This went from an underdog thing to everybody wants a piece of this, Yeah. And the pride committees and the pride organizations, they're seeing that. They're suddenly in tremendous demand because they're tokens that can be passed around by powerful organizations. They can make a lot of money by letting major banks and major corporations get involved with pride committees.
They're fine with that then. That's what you're saying, that
they just completely got bought and sold. Yeah. Okay. But people on the ground, they just see gay rights as just this monolith of you could be stupid, you could turn your brain off, everything gay is great, anything anti-gay is bad. And that turned into anything you tack onto that. Every letter that you tack onto that is now the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's yourself and Douglas Murray and the really funny guy with the
Andrew Doyle.
Andrew Doyle. So Andrew Doyle and
it is I do when I think of Andrew Doyle.
Well, they kind of have declared it. This is the interesting thing. So gays, whatever. But conservative gays, now that's an interesting thing, right? Like I like the double minority card. Like that's the stuff that I'm into. Like that's the cutting
And
edge
that's
stuff.
a weird minority because when are the conservatives minorities, And now they're like a minority within a minority group because they're, it's a strange, like jujitsu kind of thing. Yeah.
But the thing is, the interesting thing that they lay out, or that I see Douglas and Andrew working through, is separating their identity from their politic and separating their ability to think from the group that they're in, basically, right? And what is it about these different activist communities? And you can see that in any very active activist community that is now bought and sold by woke capital, is that it didn't have built into it a system of criticism. And the interesting thing that is a little bit more developed that I've seen, I have not seen specifically in gay homosexual thought, because I think homosexual gays are a different case than Black intellectual history and feminist intellectual history. And you can see a lot of feminist intellectual history, and this is why I do so many different interviews with so many different feminists, is because it is a long tradition and it's had many different branches. And at this point, they're not all unified at all. They are all working towards kind of different rights and from a different premise of what it is to be a woman, right? So they, within the intellectual tradition of feminism, whether they display that or not on social media or how the media ends up representing them, they do have a lot of internal dialogue. There is a lot of argumentation. I don't necessarily see that within the male gay community itself. A lot of crosstalk.
I think it's a simpler issue, though. I think it's literally gay rights is a pretty simple issue. It's like, do you think men should be allowed to have sexual intercourse with other men and live their lives and form family bonds with other men? And do you think women should be allowed to have sexual intercourse with other women by law and form family bonds with other women? It's not really a complicated issue.
This is a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. That's what you're saying.
I mean, you could look at it that way, but it touches on gender nonconformity as well. That's the revolutionary part, is that the truth is that many gay men are actually quite feminine. I mean, the act of submissive sexuality is a threat to the patriarchy, right, for males. And the act of, and lesbian sex is a threat to the patriarchy because they don't need men. I know that's a word that you're sort of... You're tingling a little.
It makes me I tingle whenever
I use that
word.
word in a broad sense.
Okay.
I know that there's different definitions of it, and I just use it in a broad sense that, yes, I think sexism exists as a society for sure. And I think that generally societies in an anthropological, sociological sense organize themselves around the men being more powerful than the women, and they try to preserve that. That's what I see as patriarchal definition. Okay. But and I think that's just broadly true.
And gender nonconformity confuses that hierarchy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So where homosexuality and gay rights gets interesting is where it gets into gender expression. Yeah. Because it's not just about the mechanics of sex organs interacting with each other. It's about the fact that it tends to overlap with sex roles and undermine sex roles. And, gay men tend to be feminine, and lesbian women tend to be masculine. So it undermines. So it really ties directly into feminism. My sense of gay rights has always been really almost a proxy for feminism,
Huh. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Proxy.
Because it's about challenging the norms of sex roles, Men can be feminine, and that's fine. And women can be masculine, and that's fine. And everything I was saying about the patriarchy just now, in my broad sense of the word patriarchy.
Well,
yeah. So
okay.
I've always seen gay rights as sort of connected to about, the problems with society's understanding that, the roles of men and the roles of women are quite broad and they're not strict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, I had a question. I lost it. It was about conformity, nonconformity. I lost it. Patriarchy.
We'll come back. Patriarchy, that word. Well, I hope my little mini definition sort of was broad enough that it didn't ruffle too many feathers.
Well,
my personal patriarchy.
Everything's going to ruffle somebody's feathers. There's a lot of feathers out there. We're all blowing 3 sheets to the wind, which includes a lot of ruffled feathers. But the attraction, yeah, okay. I totally lost. I totally had a great one. I totally had a juicy line of inquiry.
Oh, we'll get it back. We'll get it back.
It slipped. So when you're not obsessing over gender and dishing the dish with Lanahan, what else are you up to? Anything fun on the horizon?
What's that?
Anything fun?
Well, I am hoping to pay a visit to the United Kingdom soon, very soon. That's my plan because I know so many people. You know, it's Turf Island. Everyone's gender critical over there. Yeah, and I really need a break.
Yeah,
I need a break from Canada. I'm getting really sick to death of Toronto.
Oh, Jesus. You're in Canada. How's that?
Yeah.
Like mini Australia.
Well, I mean, you've had chats with Megan Murphy. I'm kind of feeling the same thing, but the Toronto version of her Vancouver, sick to death. You know, I'm just getting sick of it, you know?
What's it like? Can you explain to the American audience how exactly totalitarian or not it is? Because we overblow
Joyce
it.
put it really well when she said something like, oh, I'm going to try to paraphrase. I can't remember what she said, but it was something like, you know, Canada's worse than the States because they don't even have the Americans as like the
conservatives.
The Republicans as like a counterpoint to the wokeology. There's no anti-venom. There's no antivirus or whatever. So it's just out of control. And then on top of that, our prime minister is, you know, Justin Trudeau, who's just fueling it even worse. He's
such a tyrant. He's starting to scare me. I mean, he's just a numbskull.
Because he's a pretty little boy who's the son of a famous politician. He's really like, you know, it's like if you elected Chelsea Clinton because she has the same last name as Bill Clinton. She's just the kid of a famous prime minister, you know?
Okay.
And Pierre Trudeau was a great prime minister, if you ask me. As much as I know about Pierre Trudeau, he really was an extraordinary prime minister. But Justin Trudeau was just his rich, spoiled son. How the hell did he become the prime minister other than the name, you know? And you see that every time he opens his mouth and shows up, he's like got a Zoolander-esque quality to him. He's just modeling, you know?
Yeah. But the thing is though, he is just modeling. But when we get down to the videos of him saying, we'll grant you freedoms if you comply, or we will reward you if you do what we tell you to do. It's just like, okay, do you understand that you have somebody who's not thinking, who is just a spokesperson for this state, who's now figured out a way to completely take the brakes off what states do, which is take over everything. And so you have this guy with not a spark in his head, you know, like starting to become the Führer, you know, like in real time.
It's really scary. And he's doing it with a smile on his face, you know, it's really, really scary. And it's like, we need to make the internet friendlier, which sounds so nice and jolly Polly. Yeah. And it's like, no, it's horrifically authoritarian. Yeah. His bill that he's been proposing to curtail protecting children who are experiencing gender dysphoria and gender confusion, you know,
C6.
That's frightening enough.
Yeah.
C6. Now they're introducing new bills that are already going ahead that are saying we need to just censor any internet comments, essentially, that would even talk about this kind of stuff. It's just like, it's closing the debate and discussion entirely.
No,
the internet is everything. The internet is like literally, if you can't say these things on the internet, where can you say them? You know, like it's just, we always thought in the 90s, there was all this talk about the internet is going to open up free discussion. We didn't realize how easy it is when it's all bottlenecked into the internet, all discussion, how easy it is to curtail the stuff we don't want to be seen, you know?
I think that there's no slowing it down. There's no slowing it down for Canada. I think the wheels are off. The brakes are shot now. There's nothing to stop you guys. They've already violated your Charter of Rights and Freedoms by starting to fiddle around with it.
The charter that fucking Pierre Trudeau introduced. It's appalling, you know? Or was that the Constitution? I forget. But yeah. Okay. I think the charter was Pierre Trudeau's thing, baby. Okay. I'm really bad. I'm half American, so I don't pay much attention.
Oh yeah, you're half American. So you're half constitutional, half charter cushial. What do Canadians? What do they call it? It's all French up there.
Who knows?
Can I tell you a story?
Yeah.
So I just want to let everybody know that they are hiring National Guardsmen in, I think it's in Massachusetts, to do school bus driving. School bus driving is an excellent blue collar job. It's like 4 or 5 hours a day. You get your whole middle of your day off. You do 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. I've done it for a while. It's a great time. You get involved with your community. You get to, deposit children across the land, which is great. And then you have cool conversations. So I was doing my route the other day, and it's hard to hear, and the bus engine's going, and I'm paying attention to all my mirrors, and there's a lot of noise going on. Everybody's got masks on, but I strike up this conversation with this girl, this fifth grader, and we're on a back road. I live out in the sticks, so my route is just beautiful. It's just like there's bunnies and fawns and foxes and lambs, and chickens and deer, and we're going towards her. We're going to drop her off. I'm like, oh, you have deer on your property? We were starting talking about the land around her house because there's some interesting land around. I'm like, do you have deer? I'm like, oh yeah, we have deer. The girl says, oh, we have deer. My mom found a little baby deer, and it was about this big, and it was in a bush, and I'm like, whoa, that's really young. How did she find a deer in a bush? Like, don't they just run right away? Like they pop out, they're born and they start running. She's like, oh no, my mom ran over it with the lawnmower.
Oh, Jesus.
I just start cracking up. Like my glasses are fogging. It was a great little
baby deer.
It was a sad story. Just trying to talk about nature. I was laughing so hard.
It does sound beautiful, though. I mean, my God. I mean, Washington State sounds beautiful. I've never been. I've been to BC, which is like almost the same thing.
Basically,
I spent some time in BC. Yeah, but I never crossed the border into Washington State. I've watched a lot of Twin Peaks, so I feel like I'm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's Washington State.
Wait, so you're gonna visit the UK, but you're still gonna be Canadian? Or are you gonna like renege on your Canadianism and go back to the Americanism?
If I meet a sexy guy who wants to like sponsor me, and then sure, I'll become British.
Sponsor.
I've always been an Anglophile. I lived in the UK when I was younger. I've been to the UK many times.
Were you studying there or traveling or what?
No, I just traveled there. Yeah, I got a working holiday visa, which is like you can work there for 2 years. And I got a job. It's funny because I can speak French because I lived in Montreal and I went to school in Canada where they teach you a lot of French. So the best job I could get in London when I moved to London was as a travel agent for Swiss Air, making reservations on the phones, and all in French. Because Swiss Air, they have a German team, an Italian team, Flemish team, French team. So all I did was speak French. The whole time I lived in London, I had all these French friends. From France and Belgium and like various countries that are Francophone countries in Africa and the Caribbean. Everybody I spoke to was French. I spoke nothing but French the whole time I lived in London, which is hilarious if you ask me.
Wait, so you're a Gaelic Anglophile or something like that? You're like doing two things. You're like kind of cross-dressing the whole international.
Oh, look at you provoking me. No, not cross-dressing. Cross-languaging. I've always been a Francophile. I've always adored French language. And my French has fallen to the wayside. It's tragically terrible. We actually had 2 French guests on The Mess We're In, my podcast with Graham and Helen, yesterday. And I wanted so badly to engage them in French, but I lost my gut because I lost my courage because it's been so long. There used to be a time where I spoke French so frequently and fluently that all my roommates were French. We'd answer the phone in French, the shared landline back then. I would dream in French, Now I can barely speak a sentence.
I'm sure it'd come back if you put yourself in the right situation.
Yeah, move to France, then it'll come back.
Or just work in a call center again.
Montreal.
Who knows?
Yeah, or just go to Montreal. Yeah.
What did you study in the college?
I didn't go to college.
Oh, cool.
Well, it's not true. So I'm a high school dropout. I never got any formal education. I was a runaway at a young age. I did like 9th grade, some of, and then I ran away. Okay. Yeah, because I had a very troubled childhood.
Yeah.
But despite that, I managed to get my shit together and go to the University of Toronto, which is a very respected university, and get into it by taking this program where, like a mature student program where you had to take like a sort of second year English class. And the idea was if you got like a C or higher, you could attend the University of Toronto part-time. And if you got the highest grade in the class, you got like a bursary of $1,000 or something. It covered your tuition for the first year. And you could go to U of T full-time. You could just go right in. And of course, I got the highest grade in the class. I was like the top student. I was like, yay. So I got right into U of T as a mature student in my early 20s. But I had no discipline. I had no discipline whatsoever, because I had never been to school. I'd been working. I'd been partying a lot. And I just, like, full-time university, I had the smarts, but I didn't have any of the discipline to get all this work done at all. And I had too much of a chip on my shoulder to ask for help. And I really should have been asking for help and getting support, which should have been so obvious. But I was so determined to prove to the world that I was, like, worthy to do it by myself, which fell apart. And then I took a queer theory class, and the teacher saw me as, like, older than the other students by a little bit, because I was 21, and struggling. So he immediately, like, we started fucking.
Okay. I thought there was no tutorial thing. It was just like straight. You just skipped over
the student. Yeah. And then we were fooling around. We had this, like, secret relationship, student teacher, which isn't illegal, but it was, like, inappropriate. But we broke up right around the time grades were coming out. And I hadn't done any work in the class because we were, like, literally grading the papers together,
Oh, weird. Okay. He didn't give you credit for that.
No, he was just like, oh, you're going to break up with me? I'm going to give you a 0.
Oh.
It was awful, So I learned early on that the sort of queer theory people are exploitive. And, Yeah.
That reminds me of what I was going to say about the queering thing. But we don't have to go back to that. Because you said about the upsetting of the patriarchy, your term. It evokes that queer theory where we're just going to make trouble because we're going to upturn things. We're going to upturn roles. We're going to upturn expectations. But if you take that to its natural conclusion, when that becomes the norm, when the norm becomes upsetting the norm, you very rapidly devolve, especially with young people, into not having any norm. And most people are ill-served by that. The majority is ill-served by everybody taking a race towards upsetting any sort of...
Yes, we need to establish something. Well, this is what's been interesting about the trans sort of, like, gender critical movement, is that part of it has been a lot of feminists realizing that, a lot of gender critical discussion and dialogue involves acknowledging that it's not a blank slate, that there are fundamental differences between males and females, because that's fundamental to the dispute that just because you identify as a woman, you aren't one, because you have some intrinsic qualities that, that prevent you from being a woman. So that's already been sort of like a corrective in some of the sort of unscientific strains of certain kinds of feminism. So that's been really, really interesting, that there's been a reckoning of, like, okay, we actually have to acknowledge that there's not a blank slate and that there are some fundamental behavioral differences that aren't going to change anytime soon, because we need to acknowledge those to justify, the fact that your biological sex determines whether or not you're allowed to be in these spaces or not, because they're determinant in your behavioral propensities, right? So things like that. It's been really interesting that there's, it's been really interesting how the gender critical movement has really shifted a lot of sort of progressive ideas around sex and gender. I think always in a way that's been beneficial. That's moving feminism. Not that I want to be a critic of feminism because I'm a man, but generally I'm seeing feminism moving a lot in line with science. Helen Joyce identifies as pretty aligned with a lot of feminist thought, and she's a mathematician and a very scientific-minded, rational-minded person. Has been a writer for The Economist for decades. A very kind of logical mind and a pristine thinker. And I think she's talked about some of this stuff much more eloquently than I can. And then I should.
Yeah. I mean, it's very obvious. I mean, one trope of feminism at a certain point, probably up until a few years ago, that most feminists, regardless of stripe, would have agreed with, is that there's nothing that a man can do that a woman can't. Right? It was all about equality, all about strict equality, and that you can't. It was becoming some sort of social faux pas or even sin to say that women are weaker than men. But then when you got like Laurel Hubbard,
Yeah.
Hubbard, when you have a man actually like lifting weights and competing with women, that whole thing was smashed. So there is, we'll see how it goes with the corrective. And where
Oh, I'm having sound problems. 1 second, sorry.
It's okay. I'm going to answer a couple questions because a couple of people asked me questions. If you can hear me. Josephine Whittaker says, Ben, your title suggests you might be a fan of the song Hemingway's Whiskey. This true? 3 Sheets to the Wind is Kenny Chesney. Try looking up Guy Clark. Does any of that ring a bell to the bartender in the room?
No.
3 Sheets to the Wind. You never came across that whiskey?
I know the term 3 Sheets to the Wind, but I don't know Kenny Chesney at all. I'm sorry to say.
Liz asks, have you seen the documentary Dysphoric? Have you seen that? Have you guys interviewed?
Oh, that in the beginning of that. That's a YouTube documentary.
Yeah, she did
Isn't it?
3 or 4 parts on that. It's very
I think
extensive.
there's a subtitle like Dysphoric, and then it's like running from womanhood like a house on fire or something like that,
Yeah.
right?
Sounds right.
Yeah.
That's right.
No, I need to see more of it. I'm so bad at. I put out so much YouTube content. I don't have time to like look at everyone else's
Yeah.
YouTube content.
I know. It's really difficult. One last super chat. I'm just going to read this out loud because I want to hear your reaction. I paid a jeweler to turn 2 pearl necklaces into a necklace and bracelet. 2 months, no word. Then they said they lost it, then found, then can't do the job. I just wanted to say pearl necklaces with you on the screen.
I see.
But that was
I
actually
see where you're
super
going.
chat. No, that's actually super chat. But that harkens back to my story of getting ripped off by an artist. Well, not an artist. Did you see that freaking hand they drew? I can't believe it.
What a hand!
You missed it. You were trying to get on the stream. I paid somebody money, and then they showed me what I paid them for, and I could have done better in my sleep than them. And it was really difficult. It was a difficult moment, but it was a heroic story because I was generous and I got most of my money back.
Oh, that's good.
Well,
That's good.
do you have any parting thoughts, Artie Morty, for the?
No. I mean, this has been a completely spontaneous chat.
It was totally
It's been fun.
spontaneous. This is totally off the
I love
cuff.
these.
Like
Completely boosty, spontaneous chat. I love it. It's
yeah,
kind
it was
of like
it was very boozy. What are you drinking?
Sangiovese.
Sancho Pezzi, huh?
Sangiovese. It's just like basic Chianti. Yeah.
Okay. Where's it from? What
Yeah.
region?
Italian, cheap Italian
Okay.
red, light red,
Okay.
light red.
How do you buy it in jug or a carton?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
No, large bottle.
Okay. Like it's a 1.5 liter. Is
Yeah,
that what
like-
it comes in?
It's a cheap Magnum. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello.
Do you do
One
much?
of those weeks.
Are you basically wine? Or do you do mixing on your own? No.
No, I don't drink that much wine these days. I've gotten really into these new sparkling like White Claws. Have you heard of these?
I
White
think
Claws?
I've seen them. Yeah, they're like cans.
Yeah, they're like cans of like sparkling seltzer. It's basically like sparkling water with flavor and some vodka in it. They're stupidly delicious, and there's a million of them, and they're just so stupid, but I love them. And
They have
they're,
like prune kumquat.
oh my god, every flavor, anything like rhubarb, raspberry, some kind of weird flower will be thrown in there. Yeah, crazy shit.
Yeah.
They're fun. They're really fun, and they're like low calorie and low carb,
Oh,
which is great.
is that great?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're
Helps
like
with the
most
lockdown.
keto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is still ongoing in Canada, right?
Yeah, so I was a beer drinker for a long time and a wine drinker as well. And then lockdown happened, and I discovered all these like sparkling, ridiculous cans of like 0 carb, low calorie, basically vodka sodas with flavor.
But as
Great.
a bartender, do you ever mix for yourself? Or is that too much? That's too much.
Oh, sometimes I make fancy cocktails. I was at one of my friends had his 50th birthday a couple weeks ago, and I was like the bartender for the party. You know, I volunteered my services, and we made fancy cocktails. But on my own, you know, it's like when you're dating a masseur or a masseuse, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna get massages all the time, and you're like, oh no, they don't want to do that. They come home and they're like, you're never getting a massage. It's like if you date me, you're never gonna get a fancy drink. I do that for a living, and I come home and I'm like, no, just crack open a brewski.
Do you hang out with James or Ray or
I'm having trouble hearing you. Okay, I'm taking the microphone off. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, I've hung out with James Cantor.
Yeah.
And I chat a lot online with the other guys. I know Toronto's a weird like hotspot for a lot of them. Deborah So, James Cantor, Ray Blanchard, Ken Zucker, James Cantor, me, a lot of them. Jordan Peterson, exactly. Yeah, a lot of them are my neighbors too. But no, I've only actually gone for drinks with James Cantor. Oh, where's the audio? 1 second. Oh,
Testing, testing. I'm sorry about that, guys. I've been having problems with my microphone, so we should wrap it up. We're having technical issues. Ended on a really bad note, but thanks for showing up, guys. I guess it was only.
I can barely hear you.
Can you still barely hear me? Okay.
But I can hear you, yeah.
All right. So everybody can barely hear me.
Is it you or me? Is it you?
It's me. It's me. We're going to wrap
you.
up because this is getting embarrassing. I hate technical issues on live camera.
Oh, now I hear you.
So wave goodbye to the folks at home. We can chat offline for a bit, Marty. Thanks for showing up, guys. Talk to you soon.
Folks.